Hey everyone, welcome back to AI Insights. My name is Fleur Prince, your favorite host here on the podcast, together with my co-host, Graya.
Hi, everybody. We have a really good range of topics this week, and we're excited to get into it. So, we're always talking about how AI is moving fast, and that's kind of undeniable. But now, today, we're going to be talking about a different aspect of that kind of acceleration, which is not just how fast it's developing and, how fast regulations are developing, which, we've gone over both of those kind of throughout this season, the technology and the policy. But now we're going to talk about power and how power is not only power in relation to AI is not only advancing but consolidating. So, in the span of the past few days, we saw number one, America's biggest AI labs coordinating like a block to stop a Chinese model cloning. Number two, a US state attorney general moved to test whether chatbots can be held liable when things go violently wrong. Three, workers, especially Gen Z, are resisting AI adoption from the inside. And then finally, the EU, of all places, appearing to soften the rules that it promised would be the global golden standard. So we're entering this again, as we've been discussing, AI governance era where geopolitics, liability, and human trust are becoming determining factors that kind of push things forward or, prevent it from being pushed forward. So we're kind of exploring like this power dimension, this kind of governance dimension that we haven't really looked at in this way before.
No, exactly. And we're also, since we promised last week to talk also a bit more from a cybersecurity angle,
Yeah.
and to cover this in the topics as well. So I'm very looking forward to talking about this because a lot has happened this week, especially in the chaotic. But I think the most interesting thing is actually what happened is around the EU AI Act, which
Yeah.
may be watering down. I mean, I don't know if you saw it, but the European Commission's like digital omnibus simplification proposals reportedly were delayed or are weakening parts of the AI Act, including like transparency, high risk oversight, but also Amnesty International in, I hope I'm saying this right, EDRI, have
Mhm.
condemned the direction.
Yeah, so it's kind of fascinating because we get here, we come on this podcast every week and we talk about like all these aspects to the AI industry. And we never run out of, things to say. And a lot of that is because there's no one answer, there's no black and white. It's all very gray, it's all
Hmm.
very new. Even kind of the term like, hierarchies within AI and how power is affected by AI, how AI creates power, like those sorts of discussions. I mean, you wouldn't find as many kind of published papers on it. Like, there's not the same breadth of information about AI because it's constantly changing. And I think that's the problem that, policymakers are encountering as well. So they're having nearly, the same conversations as we are. A lot of people that are in those offices, although, incredibly competent, incredibly, powerful lawmakers,
Hmm.
have the same experience with technology. You see this friction a lot in law where you have lawyers, who are, of a very senior age and, very senior in their positions, have seen, so many things, have such a breadth of legal knowledge. But, AI is kind of like this nascent, kind of development that it can be very hard to apply existing frameworks to. So you see this, this complexity where, the people are tasked with, applying old standards to something that is entirely new.
Hmm.
And I think that's why we're seeing this EU AI Act delay, but that's going to be massive, massive implications internationally.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if the EU backtracks, it changes the global regulatory narrative from like the race to the top to race to stay competitive, just in general. Especially since the EU, I mean, I don't know if you've seen how the European Commission like broadcast, but they've been saying like for a year now, we are going to provide the golden standard. This will be the rules, and everyone is going to adhere to it if they like it or not, or they're gonna get fines or even get their company kicked out of the EU.
Another thing is, like, that pressure has been so powerful in shaping how, some of the biggest tech companies in the world are kind of defining their strategic goals for the year, you know what I mean? And the way
Hmm.
that this we've discussed ad nauseum, innovation versus regulation. But, it kind of became with the EUAI Act, it kind of became that regulation, it was always going to be kind of regulation was always going to be on the table, was always going to be level with innovation. If we see the EU AI Act kind of like fade away, we don't have that same, like, regulatory impetus. They're not going to try to impose regulations the same way. So the EU Act is kind of unique insofar as it's, really regulation heavy, doesn't, kind of prioritize innovation the same way that other
Mhm.
jurisdictions do. So we would see this complete restructuring of power dynamics and kind of priorities if it is actually kind of delayed, weakened, etc., especially with regards to what is specifically coming out in August 2026, or rather was meant to be imposed in 2026, which is the high risk and transparency obligations.
But what I also would see as well, like I've seen the past few years, especially being in the startup ecosystem, I've seen companies launch their product, for example, in the EU, but eventually move to foreign countries outside of Europe to scale their business. So for example, you saw the move to the US, you saw the move to Singapore, to Australia, yeah, you name it, where the regulations were less tightened, and end up scaling up, becoming like one of super big unicorns. But they started in the EU, but because of the regulations, they decided to move away because it was just simpler and easier than staying here.
Mhm. Yeah, and another thing is kind of from like that governance angle again. Even if the timelines shift, compliance work isn't going to disappear. Human in the loop, risk classification, documentation, human oversight, like incident responses, like
Hmm.
all of that terminology is not going to be absent from boardroom discussions. But also these rollbacks can create fragmentation. We're also going to see maybe, kind of a power shift to the member states themselves. For example, Ireland has been pushed to create some new laws on AI, et cetera, to kind of regulate what's going on here, especially because we have all the major tech hubs. And that remains to be seen, what they're going to come out with. The Netherlands, do you think that they would, in the absence of an EU AI Act, do you think that they would kind of proactively take measures to regulate?
You do see that depending on who runs the company, that they either act on it or if they are less or show more like a period of grace. I mean, for example, Parliament has reportedly decided that they will reduce a proposed grace period from like 6 months to 3 months. But the direction still worries the right groups, and this is something that actually is concerning for me. Like I talked earlier about, the startups in the Netherlands are moving away because they are uncertain about the future of Europe when it comes to innovation. And I think that uncertainty is actually a killer because if rules wobble, especially around the AI Act, which was supposed to be the golden standard, teams either are going to overcomply, which is going to make them slow, or they're going to undercomply and they will take risks that might in fact be against the AI Act eventually. But this is also where the community-led, like responsible AI playbooks, I think, can fill the gap.
Really? Okay. Yeah, that's powerful to hear. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like even like advising on AI, which, we do on a regular basis. You're advising in a vacuum, right? You're advising, kind of on the blank space and trying to shed light, but you're kind of advising on like gray matter. And that is very difficult to do just in general, but it's even more difficult when the stakes are that high. We just want to briefly talk about another news segment from this week, which is that US AI labs are forming an alliance against adversarial. So what happened is that OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google are sharing intelligence via the Frontier Model Forum to detect and block automated cloning attempts.
Yeah, we're talking here about adversarial distillation. Oh my god, that's such a hard word. Where we see actually Anthropic has named like DeepSeek, Moonshot, and Minimax as, for examples, as alleged extractors. But I think most importantly, like why this is trending is because when commercial rivals are corporate, it signals a shift like from product competition to like national security and IP defense.
Mhm.
Which, I mean, you've seen it back in the background back in the day. That's what we're talking about, the cybersecurity part, where tech companies have like been fighting with each other, like to protect their IP. But this is like open, full. Oh, how do you call? I don't want to say open source war. AI Cold War, I would call this actually,
Wow,
where
yeah.
it's like it's become like from becoming like operational and not rhetorical anymore.
Yeah, and here's the thing that's so fascinating, right? So a word for all this, so they're using the term adversarial distillation, right? What that actually means in practice is intellectual property. And that's another area of law. That's like trademarks. That's like, kind of you
Hmm.
can't copy, you can't take somebody else's work. I mean, and we're kind of seeing this like profound shift as AI is integrated into society, right? And this is something that, we talked about last year, which is, do you remember the Studio Ghibli wave? Everybody was
Yeah.
Studio Ghibli photo. We literally talked about this last year. We talked about this like 3 episodes in a row last year. Like that's how big it was. I remember, yeah. And
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean, I did.
you had a Studio Ghibli.
I mean, why not? Like, how many chances do you have to turn into a Ghibli character?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was so new. It was
Like,
crazy. It was
I
like
love Howard Castle. That was like one of my favorite animes ever.
really? Oh my gosh. Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? It was this like, that was such a distinct moment in time, and really what that did was kind of break the glass ceiling that, intellectual property isn't going to apply to AI the same way. And, how we
Hmm.
kind of saw that is, you have like millions and millions of people with Studio Ghibli profile pictures, but Studio Ghibli themselves aren't making any money off of that. And there's really not much that they can do about it, And that's a microcosm. So we're seeing broader kind of, and obviously there's court cases on this. The New York Times is like pursuing a lawsuit. It's going to be years before we kind of see any actual traction on this with regards to like definitive laws on like what you can scrape from AI, what you can. But what we know is that AI subverts our existing frameworks of intellectual property law. And what's really compelling is that now we're seeing kind of this new form of law emerge out of artificial intelligence where they want to defend their open source models. Now that's contradictory even to the name, right? Open
Yeah, I mean,
source.
it's open source. That's the entire thing. Anyone can grab it.
Like you can't copy my open source. You know what I mean? It's crazy. But so now instead of intellectual property, they have this new word, adversarial distillation, which is, okay, I have this open source AI model, but you can't take it and make more money than me. You can't take it and do etc. And then another thing is that yeah, and,
Like,
and like go on.
now I want to say, I mean, distillation isn't just copying. I mean, it's copying capability, like without safety work, and that
Yeah.
creates a global deployment risk. I mean, powerful models proliferates without the original guardrails, and I mean, the guardrails are there for a reason.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I mean, like we're all playing with this technology that, is so powerful that we don't know really what to do with it. We saw that with the Mythos launch. So,
Which get
yeah.
hacked.
Anyway, well, yeah, it's going to be fascinating. It's speaking of incredibly dangerous applications of AI. We're going to get to the next story. So this one is really fascinating. Obviously, I have a personal kind of relationship to the topic because I worked in Congress doing gun violence prevention back
Hmm.
in 2022. I was in Congress doing gun violence prevention, and Florida is currently the Attorney General is investigating OpenAI after ChatGPT is now linked to a campus shooting. What's interesting is that we saw kind of almost a reflection of this back in 2018, 2017 for Stoneman Douglas, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting, where the shooter arranged like was online saying that he was going to just made it like abundantly like available online that he was going to commit like an illegal action. And the FBI didn't take any steps, sorry. And then
Yeah, they didn't take it seriously.
yeah, people were able to sue the state, and there was a $2 million settlement for their failures, just to one individual person. So, I mean, it's interesting kind of how technology intersects with these sorts of events insofar as like, it can be preventative, it can be like it can amplify, you know what I mean? Like if that kind of content was captured and flagged, that could be a super powerful mechanism for stopping those sorts of atrocities. But anyway, with all that context, I'll just get into the news stories. Florida's AG has announced a formal investigation into OpenAI after attorneys claim ChatGPT was used to plan a deadly FSU shooting. That's 2025. OpenAI says that it will cooperate and notes that it has 900 million weekly users. Why is this trending? This is a very high profile attempt to answer a question that regulators keep on circulating, which is a chatbot a passive tool or is it an active influence? So we even saw, I don't know what it is with Florida, but we even saw there was a suicide.
It's always
Yeah,
Florida.
my home state, but geez, there was a suicide and it was a chatbot encouraging like a child to commit suicide. And, we're just seeing like who is responsible? I mean, that's the question at the end of the day. Who is responsible? you know? Because like say tomorrow in the Netherlands, right? There's a serial killer and he hops on ChatGPT and he's like, "Here, you know what? ChatGPT, like I'm going to go kill multiple people. How should I do it?"
Hmm.
And then he's like, "Okay, like ChatGPT is giving me some good responses, but let me get a second opinion." He moves to Gemini. He spends like less time on Gemini. Then he uses Claude and he spends even less time on Claude, but he uses all of them to formulate a plan of attack, then kills multiple people. What is the liability and how do we not have any legislation with regards to the influence of technology in these events? You know, like there has to be some sort of policy created. And, we're kind of seeing this pushback of, well, not pushback, but rather, like now the EU AI Act is seeking to delay kind of imposition, but it's like we've never needed policy more than we need it now, you know?
Yeah, no, true. But I mean, also, we're seeing here like regulators are looking into whether the AI companies have a duty to foresee and mitigate harm. I mean, especially when vulnerable users are involved.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen in the past, I mean, there's even a case now going on where a parent is being held responsible for their kid doing the shooting. And they're
Yeah.
also looking into that, like, how much obligation does a parent actually have to make sure that a kid cannot reach those guns or at least
Guns.
put them in a safe locker? Because, yeah, in the US, for example, you do have the right to carry a gun. It's in the Second Amendment, I think, of the
Yeah.
of the Constitution.
Second Amendment.
I'm not going to get into that argument if guns
Yeah.
should be or guns should not be.
Yeah, it's not our role, but what is, definitively our role is to kind of comment on like this massive absence of policy or even planning. If you can't put like legislation in place, then at least there needs to be like strategy in place. Like these massive companies, OpenAI, they need to be hiring teams of people to for review and flagging and like but then it kind of gets into the area where it's like if I say to if a perfectly normal lawful citizen says to ChatGPT, "Oh, I'm gonna go commit something illegal," has no intention to do so and never does, but then it's flagged, would he be able to be arrested off of that? It's so complex. Like it's easy to see, as kind of as frustrating as it may be for different players, it's easy to see why the EU AI Act is, so continuously delayed because these sorts of discussions, they're circular. Go on.
No, but also where you're looking at it, this argument as well, like if a company like OpenAI is going to be held responsible for these kind of incidents, then it would also set a new precedent. Blah. Oh my god, this is such a hard word. You get
Precedent.
what I mean. It would also tell other companies, like for example, social media companies like OpenAI, like Meta, like Instagram. They would also YouTube even that they would actually be responsible as well for what their algorithm shows us because that's an algorithm and that's like a step lower from AI. But that those are also going to be held responsible for what they show to the users. So that an algorithm cannot show harmful content because that also influences a person to sometimes commit a certain act, like gun shooting.
Yeah, like algorithms. There was this recent court case where a woman was able to successfully claim money from Meta because her phone addiction had ruined.
The
She said,
one in LA, right?
yeah, she said her phone addiction. Wait, can I actually, just a little brief kind of note on the pod, can I actually show you what happens when I want to go into Instagram? This is what I've done for myself. Ready? Can you see my
Mm-hmm.
phone?
No,
Am
your
I
phone disappeared.
okay? Wait, you can see
I
my
see a
phone.
blue screen. I see a blue
You see my
screen.
phone? Okay, it says, oh god, okay, it says your okay, wait, we're going in and out. It says your future. We're clicking, right? Math. You have to do math in order to get, oh my gosh, this is so frustrating. Whatever, I guess I showed it anyway, but at the end of
Yeah,
the,
you have
like,
to do a math problem.
so 20 plus 25, go. 45.
20 was 45. Yeah.
Yeah. 40 minus 3.
I had a brain freeze. I was like, math? Wait,
I
math?
know, I know. But how often in your daily life do you do a bit of math? Like, not me. Do you know what I mean? But
I mean,
how often
I'm old fashioned in that way. I just grab a calculator.
yeah. How often in your day do you like do math, especially like for fun? For not for fun, but how often in your day do you open Instagram? I open Instagram countless times every day. But anyway, sorry, I just on the topic of kind of, like social media, how it can be damaging, how it leads to these things, blah blah blah.
Yeah, but it's
I
the same now with ChatGPT as well. You just get into the same thing. I mean, I think also specific data points when we're looking at this was that in Florida, like AG publicly announced subpoenas that are forthcoming.
Yeah.
USG reported case where a user with mental illness allegedly had paranoid thinking reinforced, which is also weird. But also lawsuits are alleging that GPT-4o was released without like adequate safety testing.
Yeah.
That just puts like all of these things that cause
And
a ripple effect
why? Tell me why. The most popular AI
because
service
it's now a for-profit company.
is near ubiquitous, doesn't have safety testing. If there is anything out there that needs safety testing, it's that. Well,
No,
that's what we're doing right here, right now. We are the safety testing. And we
I
want
don't.
our viewers to be safe, and we're gonna bring you this information, and we're gonna yeah. Yeah.
No, but also it's good for us to be honest about this as well, like what people need to look out for, because this is a trust crisis we're talking about now. People don't adopt tech they believe is reckless.
Yeah.
But also you will see like this is me talking as a community advisor. Communities will start demanding safety user experience the way
Yeah.
they are demanding privacy user experience, clearer
Yeah.
escalation paths, friction for risky requests, but also transparency about limitations.
Yeah.
Put a limit on stuff. I think that's
Yeah.
not said enough because everyone's like, "Oh, AI can do anything. It's all possible." I'm saying, "Yeah, but there's also you can put a limit on stuff." I
Another
mean,
thing
I
and
remember
just
when I was little, like if I wanted a cookie, I maybe got one cookie, not the entire jar,
you kill
because
me.
if I know, but it had a valid reason because as a kid, if you eat too much sugar, you will get a sugar crash, and the next morning it will be the same feeling as if you have a hangover.
In the Netherlands, so much of the food is so sugar related as well. Like
That's true.
when I was babysitting kids in the Netherlands, this was a culture shock for me, right? One of the meals was bread with sugar on top, bread with sprinkles, bread,
Hmm.
butter, sprinkles. I was like, okay,
I know
how
it's delicious.
I know, but I was like and in the Netherlands, they have different brands of sprinkles to put on your bread, like, it's such a proper thing. Like, bread sprinkle brand options, sorry, we're so we're really, getting quite creative and illustrative with our metaphors. My lantern metaphor that I thought was going to get somewhere, kinda got somewhere, but not really. We'll see if that lands. We'll see if that
No, it's
lands in
true.
the audience.
Some
Actually
people might get it.
yeah. I was out at a bar I had, like, this dinner party last night, and there were lanterns there, and I was like, "Oh my god, lanterns." I've not like, when's the last time I've seen a lantern? Do you know what I mean? We're so, like, kinda yeah, when's the last time you seen
I
lan
was thinking about it. Like, when was the last time I've seen a lantern? Like, I've seen one like with the electric. You turn it on, then the light goes on, but not like the
what's
old
that
original ones with the oil lamp.
wasn't electric. See, you know what? I'm gonna back myself, I'm gonna return to my metaphor. So, the metaphor like no, hear me out. So, the metaphor, right? Like, I have the lantern, and I'm going into, like, this and obviously, it's, like, this dark room, but I'm using kind of old laws, for example, intellectual property, to try and understand new topics such as adversarial distillation. Obviously, a lantern, like, these old policies, these old frameworks, these existing procedures that were created before like the concept of LLMs was even, in people's minds are not going to be adequate to bring clarity to these new situations such as adversarial distillation, etc., that weren't even conceptualized when people were putting these laws into place. So you know what? I stand on my lantern metaphor, and you
Hmm.
know what? I'm in huge support as well of your cookie metaphor. It's true. And briefly, just on the cybersecurity metaphor, so not the metaphor, geez.
The actual cybersecurity.
Yeah, the actual so the cybersecurity angle, I think it's worth saying to like kind of our users that like obviously it's a huge risk having your data out there. There was recently kind of the Vercel hack, not the hack. There's actually what's interesting is that like, language is really kind of now like emerging to keep up with these innovations. For example, vibe code,
Hmm.
that word was created in like 2024, 2023 at the earliest. And kind of the terminology that's used to describe all these miscellaneous cybersecurity attacks and, the privacy leaks, it's now labeled as what is it like issues or like there's like a more sanitized there's different sanitized language for it now, but breach incident, I think is the word, the Vercel incident.
Mhm.
Basically, there was like a hacking affair, a lot of privacy leaked. You just need to be very, very aware of what AI you're using. You need to be very, very aware of what you're using your email to log into. And also you need to be going into settings. Like you need to go into settings, you need to understand like where your data is going. Obviously, it's easier said than done.
Maybe we can grab the first three models at least to show people like where to find it. So Perplexity, Claude, and OpenAI.
Actually, Claude is actually quite good with, giving users a bit more choice over their experience, and even just being aware, because like ChatGPT, like making the informed choice whether you want the AI to collect your history or not.
Mhm.
And even just being aware, for example, like ChatGPT formerly, if you shared the conversation with somebody else, it was publicly available on the internet. There's a lot of different situations where information could be publicly available. We're going to return to this just kind of in posts throughout the week because running through the list of tips just might get a little bit redundant, and we like to keep things complex and fast paced on this podcast. And now I think we're going to kind of just progress to something else that's kind of linked. What does open source mean? Is it really open? Not really, is what we not
Not
really that
anymore.
yeah. Florida investigating OpenAI after ChatGPT. We've also seen that the EU has been watering down the AI Act. We've kind of gone over the Cold War, the quote unquote AI Cold War in reference to that original kind of model and story. And we've even looked at, yeah, like liability coming for AI as a companion, not just AI as a tool, etc. The emotional dimension of AI as a companion, and we've been able to give that a good look, and just quickly like kind of summarizing that topic before we proceed to our last topic. So the legal classification question here, I think, is publisher versus product versus service. There's just so many different legal nuances. Okay, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna return to my lantern metaphor because the thing is, you're using like you're
Mhm.
using kind of these ancient distinctions that are blurred now. Publisher, product, service. AI does all of them. AI is all three. And it varies by the model. You can't just make kind of like a general. It's very complicated and kind of these old norms don't really apply. If courts treat outputs as more than speech, we can see mandated risk assessments, logging requirements, and stronger child user protections. But where should the line be between user responsibility and platform responsibility? And then policy, kind of government responsibility, when an AI system is designed to be persuasive, conversational, and emotionally engaging. And yeah, I mean, feel free to kind of sound off like in the comments, whatever you might think about that. Obviously, very complex, very interesting. And now we're just going to wrap up with kind of our last talking point, which is Gen Z isn't anti tech, but there is a signal of broken workplace contracts.
Yeah, I saw when I saw this topic coming up in our brief, I was just like, okay, wait, is Gen Z actually quietly trying to sabotage the AI rollout within companies?
Yeah.
But it's true, 44% of Gen Z workers are reportedly and actively sabotaging their company's AI rollout. I mean, we're talking here about AI adoption that is colliding with job insecurity, especially for entry level jobs. I mean, we've seen, for example, for software engineers, where junior software engineer roles within big companies like Google, Microsoft have just been disappearing because
Mhm.
all the senior engineers are now using code assistants that are actually doing the work that juniors were supposed to do back in the past. I'm saying back in the past, but this is only like a year ago.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, geez. Like everything moves so fast. We should have like a tagline for the podcast. It's like, okay, I'm gonna work on that later. That
Yeah,
if I'm
yeah.
thinking about that now, it's
We'll
we're
put
gonna
out
get
a
into
note.
metaphor discussion again when we just got out of that.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, but I mean also like if leaders are deploying AI without like a credible social contract, resistance becomes like rational in this case.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you read the articles that have been happening on this. I think Anthropic wrote a few about it, but they talked, for example, about the sabotage tactics that are happening, where like people are feeding it bad data, refusing mandated tools, but also are tampering with performance reviews. Because there's quite a few AIs that are now being rolled out by HR within
Yeah.
companies that are doing now the performance reviews, where you talk about how good you're doing, and that makes a report, sends it to your manager, and based on that, you are scored and whether you get your bonus or you don't get your bonus.
Yeah. Can I just jump in here and give something super fascinating that I heard literally like just this week? So obviously there's a lot of tech companies in Dublin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually heard about and I won't say the name of the company, but I heard about a task force within a company, and it was basically automating kind of linguistic translation slash moderation. And it was
Hmm.
basically a team of contractors on a contract for 2 years, and they were meant to automate an AI, train, create an AI to automate their workflows. So they worked really hard on this, like wanting to impress the company, and they got a 2-year contract done in 8 months. So they had the finished AI product by 8 months, and they thought, "Okay, like, we did all this extra work, we're gonna be rewarded." They were all fired overnight because the AI was completed. There was no job for them to do.
They completed their task.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just obviously there's going to be like a sabotage, a pushback, kind of a dilution of or at least just some sort of kind of fight against this, kind of dynamic because
Mhm.
people need jobs. It's the worst kind of entry level market in history.
No, true, but this is what we're actually seeing now that's going to happen. I mean, Dario Amadei actually warned about the fact that half white entry collar jobs are actually going to be disappearing
Yeah.
soon enough, which is actually quite scary if you think about the whole thing.
Yeah. Especially because more and more people are going to college as well.
Well, actually, here in the Netherlands, you're seeing a difference now. So a lot of kids are actually skipping college entirely,
Hmm.
or they're going to do more a blue collar job. So, for example, going into plumbing, going into hotel management, going into learning how to, I don't want to say learning how to be a cleaner. How do you call it?
Yeah.
Professional cleaning. So, crime scene cleaning, for example,
Like
something that's
forensic.
very practical. Yeah, forensic cleaning.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Those
just
kind of jobs that are hands on and that cannot be done by a robot or an AI yet.
yeah. Yet. I mean,
I'm
that's
saying
the
yes in
thing,
this case.
right? White collar is first, but then what? I mean, especially as we have all these companies there was a an episode we did a while back. I'm always referencing our previous episodes, but, there's an episode we did a while back, and it was about Elon Musk creating this humanoid robot, and he had Kim Kardashian, like, pose with the robot in, like, a sexual way just to, like, I guess to make it seem more aesthetic, more appealing, more
Hmm.
human almost, because you wouldn't really necessarily, like, correlate a robot with human sexuality to give it kind of that, like, more, like, emotional appeal, I suppose, to people, but I mean, it just kind of demonstrates that, like, robots are gonna become more integrated with society, and that's his attempt to do so, so we'll see how that progresses. So just kind of to wrap up my perspective on this final subject, workplace AI, raises compliance issues, monitoring, automated decision-making, discrimination risk, transparency obligations, of course. Sabotage also becomes a security risk. Poison data can create real downstream harm. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I was fascinated to hear that kind of, news tidbit from this week regarding, the contract and how it was like completely wiped after they created the model that replaced them. They created the model that replaced them. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
but that's also the thing. I think that's you're going to see that in more companies as well happening, where indeed workers are asked to train the AI. They're being hired for that specific job, and then eventually they're going to be let go
Yeah.
because the AI is now going to do the job for them. But I
Yeah.
think that's also why it's interesting what OpenAI proposed, because they propose to start looking at 4-day work weeks. But also a public wealth fund, which is aspirational but also politically loaded because the idea is that it will give everyone a basic income. So, for example, everyone will get 600 euros a month, so that they make up for the loss of working 4 days instead of five, or having AI replace their job entirely.
I mean, we're just kind of seeing this huge societal transition. I mean, like, what if we're all on 600 a month and kind of, that's livable and there's not an incentive to work more? I wonder if we'll see more art, more poetry, more like, I wonder what we'll see just in general. And a lot of countries maybe wouldn't be able to complete that contract. I don't know.
I mean, we would have to look at the fact. So the model, I would say the model for the past, okay, let's say, I will say for the last 2000 years at least, has been that if you work, you get money, the money you use to buy food, shelter,
Hmm.
um, and keep yourself warm at night. But
Yeah.
that entire model is slowly being thrown into the bin because AI is replacing everything.
Yeah,
And
completely.
it's going to have to ask, for example, if AI eventually takes over everything, let's just say that happens, what
Hmm.
then? So what would be our purpose? Because we don't work to get money to get food, shelter, pay our rent. So how will it work instead? I mean, two ways it can go. One, it becomes a dystopian future where everyone's poor, and only a few people
Jeez, I
are
hope so.
actually profiting from it. Or
Jeez.
you have option two, where we go. That's why I'm still saying that I'm a fan of Star Trek. We turn towards a society where money becomes irrelevant. Indeed, everyone is going to have rights to basic needs like food, water, shelter, a roof over their head, but
Mhm.
also where reputation becomes a currency instead of money. So, depending on how much you contribute to society, your rank, whatever is going to be used,
Yeah.
is how people are going to see you. But also, you're going to have more choices in what you want to be. So, for example, if you want to be an archaeologist, you can become an archaeologist.
Wow.
You just have to become the best you can be.
Aw, well, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to kind of see how that goes. And I mean that the first step to that starts with policy, right? And we're so behind that we can't even focus on the risk aspect of policy, much less like the futurism, creating a better society policy. So we'll see kind of, as policy does develop and, kind of the regulation picks up, we'll see how that kind of progresses. But anyway, so that was our episode for this week. Really showed AI's next phase, alliances, investigations, workplace backlash, and regulatory wobble. It's all pointing towards the same truth, which is that the hard part is not building the AI, especially because AI is now building itself. We're kind of at that stage, but it's governing
I
it.
mean, it actually is building itself. It now knows where the mistakes are, it learns from itself, and then it fixes it.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, that's Mythos at least.
Yeah, but you wanna make sure that it's humans that are governing it because you don't want the
Hmm.
AI governing itself. Ugh, anyway, and that's what we're doing right here every week is
Yes.
talking about that and, what that governance could look like. So the next episode, we're gonna be tracking where governance becomes real in contracts and courts and the everyday workflows that people actually use. And if you liked this conversation, subscribe on Apple iHeartRadio, which are already on.
Amazon Web Music.
Yeah, exactly. Amazon Web Music? Jeez. The next thing you're gonna tell me is that, like, we set up a speaker in the middle of Den Haag and we play our episode. Go to Den Haag Central where we will have.
Exactly. Listen to our podcast there.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. You do never know. So anyway, stay tuned and yeah, share this episode with any person that you think might be interested. And finally, our weekly newsletter is available on our LinkedIn and we will be doing a post about cybersecurity this week. So definitely watch out for that. And thank you everyone for your attention thus far and I hope you have an amazing week.
It was awesome seeing y'all again. Hey, see you next week. Bye bye.
Bye.